Hello, hello. We are live, coming to you live from Virginia, answering all your heating and air questions as every week, live here at 8:30 Eastern. So if you're not here on the East Coast, find out what time that is for you. Of course, we've got Arch from the West Coast, so he knows what time it is on his in his time zone. Welcome to Bob, Gary, Gil, Mark. Good to see everybody. Thought I would start tonight's show out with a little story. Again, before we dive into this, if you have any questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. A lot of times there's some other pros on here live as well. And if I don't know the answer to your question, perhaps one of them will. Sometimes there's different answers too, different opinions on certain matters, right? But I thought I would start tonight's show out with an interesting story I found. This story, let's see. It's on a website called The Energy Mix, and it starts out reluctant U.S. car dealers and HVAC installers could slow electrification. And so there's this push right now. There's this push in our country, and not just our country, but in a lot of countries, for electrification. And some consumers are pushing back. Some of you may be pushing back. You don't want to drive an electric car. Maybe you like your gas car, or truck. And you also might like your oil or gas heat, and you don't want to make this switch to electrification. And so I thought this story was interesting because it pointed out not just that consumers are a part of this, but the HVAC installers themselves are a part of this, right? So if you can't find a heating and air company or installer to install the product that you want, then that, really lessens your options as a consumer, and I help folks on our website, new HVAC guide, newhvacguide.com, and where we help people through the process of, buying a heating and air system, helping them, try to avoid some of the problems that homeowners face when they're going through that process, and trying to help them through that and educating them and so on. And one of the things that we'll run into sometimes is I'll have customers on that website, or, consumers say, I can't find anybody in my area that will sell a particular brand or a particular product. And, so if they've got, let's say, 20 companies in their area, and none of those companies want to do what they want, none of those companies want to install a heat pump, for example, then that customer can't have a heat pump, unless they want to have it installed by somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, or, try to install it themselves. There's some DIY options out there. And then, of course, that brings on a whole set of problems, right? So getting back to our story here, it reads, even as U.S. consumers increasingly embrace electric vehicles and heat pumps, supply chain bottlenecks may arise from established networks of fossil car dealers and HVAC installers who are still heavily invested in legacy technologies. We've ran into that here on our YouTube channel. We've had guys say, hey, I don't want to sell high SEER heat pump systems, inverter systems. I'm going to sell what I want to sell. I don't care what the consumer wants or what the industry is going towards. I think I know my customers better than the manufacturers or the government. I know my customers better than them. I've done the math, and the math just doesn't work. That's what some of them will say. And so, they are, as this article just said, heavily invested in those legacy technologies. The concern emerging in the U.S. may actually point to a difference between the U.S. and Canadian markets. Over the weekend, Clean Energy Canada reported that EV demand is still surging and supplies are still insufficient in Canada. So, wow. So that points out another point. When we in the US are looking at how other countries are moving towards, say, electric vehicles, and they're having issues making that switch, that's might be something that plays a role in this as well. The Vancouver-based added that data based on showroom sales paints an incomplete picture of EVs, quote, have upended the traditional dealership model, unquote, that applied to internal combustion vehicles. In the U.S. government, support for EV makers and buyers, standardization of charging technology, blah, blah, blah. I don't really care about the car side of this article. I thought it was more interesting, the HVAC side of this. Here we go. Heat pump uptake also risks being slowed by an, quote, incumbent network, unquote, pushing back against new technology. American households bought more heat pumps than gas furnaces for the first time ever last year, but heating, ventilation, and air conditioning contractors' reluctance to learn the installation guidelines could slow things down. Let's see. So what are your thoughts on this, guys? As we go through this article, what are your thoughts? Have you run into this? Have you seen some contractors saying, hey, I don't care where the industry's heading. I don't care that you want this newer technology. I'm not going to sell it. Have you run into that? I'm very curious. Quote, contractors may not be familiar with the latest options. They may have existing sales channel relationships limiting their access to the latest and greatest, and they fear bad reviews, unquote, writes Bloomberg. Recognizing the urgent need for installer education, the U.S. Department of Energy is now heavily involved in the training established and upcoming HVAC professionals on heat pump technology, assisting in almost 80% of all HVAC training programs in the country. Wow, I didn't even know. So that's interesting right there that the DOE, it says, is assisting in almost 80% of all HVAC training programs. Ensuring all systems go on EV and heat pump adoption will be critical to reaching net zero by 2050 targets, Bloomberg noted. Of the U.S. $194 trillion in investment that Bloomberg NEF estimates will need it. I can't read tonight, guys. I can't read every week, right? Estimates will be needed to hit that target. 51% will be spent on these two technologies. So yeah, I just thought that was an interesting article as we've talked about in the past, with, the fact that there are some heating and air guys, whether it's, they don't want to make the switch. Maybe it's they feel like they know better. Maybe they have, done the math and they think that there's no upside to paying the extra money for some of these systems. And I think that may have been a valid argument in the past, but as time has gone on, we're starting to see a more budget-friendly inverter systems coming out there. We've done videos on the Daikin Fit, and with some of the rebates that they have in place and some of the other programs, and I'm sure there's other systems out there too. We just, as you guys know, that's what I sell, and a lot of you know anyway. You may not know that, but they are, at times less expensive than installing a single stage system. You can actually spend less money in the end and have a extremely higher, more efficient system in the end, extremely quieter, extremely lots of things, so anyway, looks like we've got some new faces here. Bernie B from Long Beach, California. Welcome to the show. Arch says, from getting estimates, it seems the majority of HVAC contractors weren't keen asking questions about different models of heat pumps and gave estimates for what they wanted to install. It's a good point, Arch. If they either believe in what they're selling or they have some sort of agreement in place, there are brands out there that say, hey, if you're going to sell our product, you've got to sell a certain amount of our products for us to allow you to even have access to our equipment. Good or bad, that is a part of our industry. So maybe that's part of that too. But, there's always a chance that they may have just said that because they do believe in the product or brand that they are pushing, right? Ed says, good evening. Hey, Ed, welcome to the show. Home Rapid Repair. Howdy, howdy. Good friend of mine. Arch says, our house is all electric, so the decision was made for us when we bought our house, which is better for us because the only alternative is propane here where we live. Yeah, propane, it's funny because there are times when propane has gone down in price in the past, and I have seen more of a, folks say, I want propane, they'll almost shift towards that. And we all know that just like gasoline, propane can go back up just as quickly. And it has at times. And so we have customers that if they do have a furnace, if they have a propane furnace, then a lot of times they will go what we call dual fuel, which is basically a heat pump that will run on those mild days. And then where you live, Arch, if you had a heat pump, though, even with gas backup, which is what a dual fuel system is, you probably wouldn't see the gas kick on all that often, I wouldn't think. Ryan says, I haven't run into people not offering heat pumps or inverters, but have had contractors speak against dual fuel setups, not refusing to install, though. So interesting. Considering I just went over dual fuel, I'm wondering what they were saying against that. Ryan, please share that. I'm just out of curiosity. Is that something that they? I don't know. I mean, why would they be against that? That's interesting. Ryan said, I have had one contractor say that he recommends single stage because they are simple to work on and less costly in his experience, but he would still quote a higher efficiency system. Yeah, that is an argument that a lot of guys will say. They'll say, well, it's more expensive. It's more expensive to repair a higher end system. And, that actually is true. And it's a valid argument. But usually my rebuttal to that is, first of all, a lot of these systems are coming with 10, 12-year warranties. And so, the part cost doesn't even become a factor until later on. And, you've saved so much money over the years that by the time that time comes, is usually not quite as big of a deciding factor. Now, you could always point out little parts here and there that do just simply cost more. And I can think of one brand in particular that they just think their parts are made of gold, I think. But that being said, I think that first of all, the parts themselves, they don't, in my experience, they don't fail as often. Control boards might be the one exception to that rule, but I mean, when it comes to inverter compressors, do they go bad? Sure, but not as often. I've seen a lot of single stage and two stage compressors fail, and very, very few inverter systems have failing compressors, and I think there's a couple reasons for that. I think number one, I think that there's just less of them out there in general, but I also think that they do hold up better. They just last longer, if installed correctly. I think an inverter compressor will last the life of the system. That may be a controversial opinion, but they just don't fail that often. They're not as often anyway, in my experience. Let's see. John says, Josh, do you feel the Daikin Fit is unusually good at humidity control in mid-Atlantic the past few weeks, or it's mostly a function of it being an inverter variable speed FN and communicating fan and communicating? I think that the Fit itself has the same technology that a really high-end uh-oh. I moved a cable out of the way and then my computer or my camera went blank. Bear with me, guys. It would not be a live show if I didn't have an issue. I swear. Hang on, guys. I watch some other live shows and they don't have the issues that I have, so I need to get better at this stuff. Hopefully you guys can see me now. But I think just the plain and simple, John, is the Daikin Fit seems to have the same technology that a higher end inverter system, a 20 SEER, for example, has. It has that same communicating inverter technology. And so in general, they just dehumidify better. I can tell you that there are tests being done trying to compare those. And that might be something we might be able to show in a later video where we're going to try to compare the Fit in general to, some of these non-communicating inverter systems and show how much better at dehumidification that they are. And then, maybe even show a comparison with a single stage system as well. So let's see. Let me see if I can adjust this too. Come on. There we go. Get my fat face in the center here. Arch says, all the estimates we were given were for single stage 13.4 and 14 SEER package heat pumps. Arch, when are you going to pull the trigger, pal? You've been getting quotes for a long time. Ed says, my only option is geothermal or heat pumps. Had geothermal, but both systems failed due to acidic well water. Ouch. Yeah, I think there's things. We don't do a lot of work on geothermal, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I know all there is to know. But I know you can treat those systems with different types of chemicals to extend the life of those, the acidity and things like that, and the hardness in a lot of the water that we use. Arch says, I laughed the other day when I saw an advertisement for propane and a clean and economical fuel source. I've never seen propane reasonably priced here in Arizona. Yeah, I mean, I've seen it go up and down. There have been times, as I said, where I saw propane seem to come down a little bit, just like we saw gasoline come down a few years ago. Sometimes there's things going on in the world that will affect gas prices, and propane seems to do the same. Our heat pump never didn't a very good job heating our house when in got bell 40 degrees. Times like these, we wish we had natural gas furnace. Ed says, I travel a lot, and since I put in a mini split, I see mini install everywhere and nowadays. Yeah, my wife laughs. She says she never even noticed heating and air systems until she met me. And we haven't done it in a while, but one thing we used to do is I'm such a nerd. We would be out on a date or something. We'd just be out in public, and we would see heating and air systems far away and try to guess what brand it is just from the look of the system, so you get up closer and you see what brand it actually is. So it's funny how that works. It's sort of like if you buy a car, if you go buy, a Jeep tomorrow, how many Jeeps you notice on the road that you never noticed before. And the same goes for if you buy, a Ford Focus, you start noticing all the other Ford Focuses. John says, do you still install Goodman and Amana since Daikin bought them? I noticed Daikin has equal now released the Fit to Amana as the S model version seems identical. Yes, it is identical. It does not have the same controller It doesn't have the Daikin 1, but it is basically the same specs and tech. It's basically a fit relabeled. Do I still install them? I don't. We installed Goodman for a long time as our builder grade brand. And so it made the switch to Daikin quite easy when I was able to make that switch. True story, I've never installed an Amana. I've worked on a bunch of them. There's not a real good supplier in our area for Amana, and I only know of one other company that ever installed them. So there's just not as many around here. Arch says, Josh, you need to convince Daikin to make a fit to replace package heat pump. You'd be surprised at all the houses and businesses that have rooftop package heat pumps. Yeah, Arch, I think that they're so focused on the switches with the A2L refrigerants and everything, but I do know that that's something that I don't think it's just Daikin. I think you're going to see more brands in the future in general start coming out with more technologies, whether it be inverter or just some other form of being more efficient. You're going to see more heat pumps going heat pumps, package systems going that route. I think you're going to see that just because the minimums, for the efficiencies will eventually go up anyway. But I think that will probably happen someday, Arch. Just not tomorrow. Emery says, what is the most expensive HVAC system on the market? I don't know the answer to that. I've never, but I would guess, I could probably guess what brand it belongs to, but I'm not going to do that. There's one brand that it just seems like they think that, their parts and their everything is just outrageously priced, it seems like, to me. I mean, there's guys selling their stuff, so maybe they disagree. But yeah. SFL says new codes coming for AC. Always. John says, I noticed the Daikin communicating traditional format has a higher CR2 max 22 than the Fit max 17 for some same tonnage. Is this a function of the size of the condenser outside? Yes, it's all about the size of the coil. Let me look at one thing. There's one thing that I know that you guys don't because of my trip to Daikin, and let me look up real quick and see if I'm allowed to share that. Give me just a second. We have a new video. We have a video coming with some of the new products anyway. Yes, I can talk about it according to this email. So I hope that's true because I'm about to spill the beans on something. So when we went to our Daikin trip, I'm going to give you guys first access just because John is asking. I can tell you that Daikin is working on, and it will be coming out soon. In fact, I think they have already announced it in certain circles, but I don't know if it's on their website yet. But they are coming out with what they're calling the enhanced fit. And so it's going to be a higher efficiency rating. It's going to meet some of the Inflation Reduction Act standards. And that will be a part of a video we have coming up with, so I almost feel like I'm doing something wrong, throwing this news out there, but I think they have announced it. So it's not like I'm telling you anything that they haven't kind of sprinkled out there a little bit. I just don't think it's on their website yet. Maybe it is, and maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, so they're working on what they're calling the enhanced fit, and it's going to be still a side discharge unit. For those of you that don't know what the fit looks like, give me just a second. Images, boop, 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 boop. So if you guys see my screen, this is kind of what a Daikin fit looks like. It's a side discharge unit. It still works. It's not a mini split. Some people see these side discharge units and they think they're mini splits. But it's a conventional. It can be paired with as an AC or heat pump. And they are, like I said, coming out with what they're calling the enhanced fit very soon. Let's see. Brian says, I listen to you read my text and cringe. I sometimes if I see a typo and I'm reading, what you guys are typing, then I'll try to just fill in what I think it says. But sometimes I struggle understanding what some of the things are saying, and unfortunately we are live. So Tech Junkie says, John, could be that there's other things that are done too. The fit is just that. It fits. Brian says, Daikin 1 is overpriced stat. Bosch has a good package unit. Cyclone Laundry. Brian, I'm curious if you've looked at some of the higher end stats from, I'm not going to mention any other brands, but there's a few other brands that I think are quite overpriced on their stats as well. Cyclone Laundry says, looking to replace a 5-ton package unit and considering a 2-head mini split system, but was told by one vendor that the CFM output will be much less. Is this true? Looking to replace a 5-ton package unit, considering a 2-head. Wonders. So I think what you're saying is you currently have a 5-ton ducted system, and you're going to be replacing it with it says a 2-head mini split system. So I don't know if those are ducted or ductless, but it says you're saying that they're saying that they won't have the same CFM, so the same air being pumped out of them. And in short, the answer to that question is yes, that is true. But there's a reason for that. So mini splits and all inverter systems in general ramp down at times. So they're just barely running at times, unlike an older single stage system, which I'm assuming your package unit was. And so these systems, instead of these up, down in energy, where these spikes in energy, they're meant to figure out how to keep your temperature in your house and then run at the lowest speed possible, still removing humidity from the home, still, keeping, if you install a 5-ton mini split system, it'll still have the same capacity as a 5-ton anything else. 5 tons is 5 tons. It's just the operation is different. And so when variable speed fans first came out, a lot of us heating and air guys had this this task in front of us of educating consumers that, hey, if you're used to your curtains blowing back every time the system turns on, well, that is no longer going to happen. That this system is at times going to just barely be running. In fact, there were a while there where if you didn't educate the consumer about that, then they may even be unhappy. And so now I think times are changed and people are more, used to those types of products. And so they're not quite as unhappy when they notice that a system is not blowing as long as it's keeping temperature, right? They're okay with it not blowing back their curtains. But, just from your question, I'm assuming that that's what you're saying. And yes, so a mini split or any inverter system is going to at times just barely be running. Tech Junkie says, have you ever know the Daikin 1 thermostat to be incorrect? Issues with temp swings. Today, the unit has maintained 74. It's now 76, but the unit is still running and cooling. We have had a few Daikin 1s that we've had to replace. And luckily, when they're not working correctly, Daikin has never, they don't give us a hard time. Some brands, when they want you to get on the phone with tech support, and then tech support doesn't want to answer their phones, and you got to sit there and wait. And some houses we service, we don't even get good cell phone reception. So, it's just a giant battle. Whereas with Daikin, when we see one of the thermostats malfunctioning, we just get a new thermostat, throw it on the wall, make sure it's going to run correctly, and then just return the old one under warranty. Arch says, I haven't gotten any quotes since June, and we're using a couple of portable heat pumps. It was the hottest July on record. Yeah, Arch, if you made it through this year, you might just be fine with some window units, because this year, at least here in Virginia, we just had this past weekend the hottest days, I think they said in decades. Like we tied some record back in the 1800s or something. I don't know. I don't know how they do all that, but I know it was hot. I mean, the heat index, it was 108 one day. Jason, welcome to the show. Says, not sure about residential. I'm heavy commercial, and Daikin are some of the better ones. I really like their WMC chiller and the turbo core compressors. I'm the other way around, pal. I don't even know what those are. I know what a chiller is, but I've never worked on any of that stuff. My dad actually works in a Daikin applied factory. So he works in one of the custom commercial factories where they make their units here in Virginia. So pretty cool. And I didn't get into heating and air because he worked there, and he didn't start working there because I started a heating and air company. It just kind of worked out how we both took different paths in life and ended up still in some way working for the same company. Although I don't work for Daikin, I do sell their stuff. Emery says Lennox. Ed says Mitsubishi. Oh, you guys, y'all are guessing on the brands that I'm glazing over. Gary says, Josh, wanted to say congrats on your video presentation for the Daikin facility. Great work. Will there be a part 2? I was just asked that today. There won't necessarily be a part 2 to that particular video, but there is going to be a part 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even up to say 15 or 20 videos, because in that video, you're seeing clips of, say, interviews that we did. We're going to show more in-depth videos of some of those folks. And I'm actually going to be going back to the factory to do some other cool things here coming up. They've got a podcast that they've invited me to speak on, which is kind of cool. You know, I have to pinch myself that, you know, that they would even invite me to something like that. I grew up in a trailer park. So, you know, it's not hard to be humble about some of this, you know, it's just crazy. But they've also, so that'll be next month. And then also in October, we're going to be going back down for an event that they're doing for some of their potential dealers. So that'll be fun. And I hope to get even more footage. I'm taking cameras with me when I go. And they'll get tired of it after a while. I'll just be sticking a camera in their face constantly. But no, it's definitely been cool. It was cool to do that video, and we're going to do more videos just from that one trip. I've already got a couple lined up. I've just got to get, and it's a long story, but I've got to get a few things lined up. And so anyway, Brian says, sometimes your prices are related to the relationship with the vendor. That's very true. Very, very true. So this one brand that I keep bringing up that I'm not too keen on their pricing, I've got dealers in our area that sell that brand. Well, they've got to be selling it for a reason. So the only thing I can assume is they must get better pricing than I do, because the pricing that they give me as someone that's not a dealer, I think is astonishing at times, to be honest with you. When their part, like for example, if I were to order a heat kit tomorrow for one of their systems, it's literally 3 and 4 times the price that some of the other brands sell. And you might say, well, Josh, their heat kits are that much better. No, they're not. They're just not. Ryan says, part 1, how do you feel about flat rate prices? I recently made 2 high cost home improvements, standby generator and water heater, and I knew the price of the units and didn't mind paying an expert. And then part 2, I knew the price of the units by simply searching online. In the HVAC industry, it seems like the manufacturers, distributors, and contractors hide the unit prices from the customers. And then, part 3, no transparency. I don't need itemized lists, just the cost of the unit itself. And I understand overhead and profit. I just want to know what I'm buying. Yeah, I think there's pros and cons to flat rate pricing. I can tell you that a lot of brands or a lot of companies go to flat rate when they have figured in all their costs, and profit is the other thing, you know, so they are trying to come up with a price that they are, you know, creating profit. And I think it works 2 ways. So the first way is the company can say to the customer, look, this is my price to do this job, whether it's going to take me 10 minutes or 10 hours, this is our price. And it eliminates where customers might say, because if you're charging them time and material, the customer might say, oh, well, you charged me for 2 hours, but you're really only here for an hour and 29 minutes. So that's another reason some guys will look at flat rate. I can tell you at our company, we do flat rate for some things, and it's not even like a flat rate book. We just give them an upfront price. Like, this is going to be our price no matter how long it takes us. And then on some things, we don't know what we're about to get into. So we will do a time and material price where we'll say, hey, the meter's running. we're going to dive into this, and we're going to do it the best way we can, as fast as we can. But this is going to be one of those ones that we just can't give you an upfront price. And so I think the other argument that a lot of heating and air guys make with the whole flat rate pricing is they feel that they're penalized to be better at their job. Now, you guys may disagree with this as a homeowner. That's fine. I'm just trying to tell you the argument that I've heard made. And the story that a lot of guys will tell is how these companies will hire. There's this story, this old fable of this boat where nobody could get the motor running in this boat, this gigantic ship. And so they hired all these people and they couldn't get it running. And then all of a sudden this old timer shows up and takes a little hammer and pecks on the side and gets it running within 10 minutes and then sends them a bill for $4,000. And so they said, well, look, you were only here for 3 minutes. And the fable reads, well, you didn't pay me for my time. You paid me for what I know. So the point is, a lot of guys will argue, I get better as time goes on at my job. So now I can do a job in 10 minutes that it used to take me 10 hours years ago. And so you're not paying for my time. You're paying for the work that I did. I've gotten really fast at what I do. And so that's why they will argue and say that they're going to charge a flat rate price for the same job. So I don't know. Again, you can argue against that. I will say, and the last thing I'll say on that subject is there are companies out there that come up with these flat rate books, flat rate, tactics, sales tactics, where they will have almost like a good, better, best, and all that. And all that's fine. Companies do what they need to do to make money and stay in business. But I do think that there are companies out there that are teaching heating and air guys how to take advantage of people. Right or wrong, you may, as a pro, you may disagree with that. But I think if you go into a house and the control board's bad and you have a price to replace the control board, a price to replace the control board plus a bunch of other items that are not necessarily broken, and then all these higher tiers in their flat rate book, when they're replacing parts that don't necessarily need to be replaced, as a sales tactic, I do think that that's a little disingenuous. That's just my feeling. A lot of people can disagree with that, but that's just how I feel. To me, if the control board needs to be replaced and you just charge a high price to fix that, then you just charge a high price to fix that, and just be transparent with the customer. You just say, hey, the control board's bad, and here's the price of the control board, and I'm a premium company, and this is what I charge to replace that part. I'm not going to have any fancy sales tactics. If you want that, that's not me. I'm expensive, but there's a reason why I'm expensive. I'm good at what I do is the idea that some guys. So anyway, I'll get off all that, but you kind of made me go down a rabbit hole there, Ryan, which you are good at. You've done that to me a couple of times, but that's just my feeling. And I know we're getting behind on some comments here, so I'm sure some of you guys might be weighing in on this too, but it's just how I feel about it. I think that there are a few companies out there where they're teaching guys how to take advantage of people, and that's just how I feel. Right or wrong, my whole YouTube channel is to try to combat that and educate homeowners a little better, but some of these guys are, they're just, I just don't think I think it's a little skeezy, when they do their conferences and invite heating and air companies in, and teach them how to take advantage of people. They're not teaching them how to fix air conditioners better. They're teaching them how to have fancy sales tactics and take advantage of homeowners. To me, it's a little it's a little dirty. I mean, that's just me. Arch says, if my wife doesn't divorce me, we're waiting until the federal point of purchase rebates come out on the energy efficient heat pumps. Plan on buying a 2-stage 15.2 SEER 2 or SEER, but I'm sure that's SEER 2 heat pump if it qualifies. I'm sure she won't, Arch. You sound like a great guy. She'll stick around. Bucky, welcome to the show. I don't think I've seen your name before. Any experience with the DZ9VC? What advantages does the fit have over it? Yes, we've installed several of those, and I think the main thing that the fit has is that it's smaller. It will fit in some places that the DZ9 will not. So the DZ9 is basically the newer version of the DZ20s that we used to install a bunch of, and now we've installed several of the DZ9s, and they're basically, they're basically the same unit. There might be a few upgrades, but they now have a 19.3 SEER 2 rating, still inverter and all of that. But the fit really it's more budget friendly, and it's a smaller unit, smaller coil. That's why it's got a lower SEER rating. And of course it's side discharge. But, other than that, the DZ9 is going to be more efficient, because it's a higher SEER system. Tech Junkie says, I'd buy something much more efficient than that. Jason says, I'll work on a lot of VRV34s. Brian says, overpriced stats is not good for this group. Emery says, can I use an evaporator coil that is size larger than the condenser? Yes, a lot of companies do that to get higher SEER ratings. Brian says Bosch 5-ton is nice package. I have not installed one of those Bosch package units, but I have worked on one, and I think they're pretty sweet. American Patriot, welcome to the show, says, I want to thank you for the information on this channel. You saved me so much money, headache, and frustration. Thank you again. I really appreciate everything. You definitely know your info. Thanks, pal. I appreciate that. I don't know if I know everything, but I know enough to get in trouble. Tech Junkie says, Cyclone, whatever the end result is, 5-ton is never the answer in a residential setting. Well, I mean, I think if the house calls for 5 tons, then it probably needs 5 tons. Ryan says the contractor spoke out about the dual fuel system because it's more expensive up front to install. His experience seems to say heat pumps are more expensive to run in my area. Yeah, but they're not that much more. They're not that much more. And if you're going to save money, in my experience, you're going to save. Now, again, if it's natural gas, that's different. Natural gas is still cheap these days. But if it's LP, I've got customers that putting in a dual fuel system, they've saved hundreds with an S, hundreds of dollars per month by switching to a dual fuel system. Obviously I can't guarantee that for every house in every situation, but that, I've had multiple customers do that. I'm going to take a quick break from the comments here. We, usually have segments where we will do, breakout segments where we'll focus on other things. Sometimes I do goofy inventions. Sometimes I do ask the audience questions. And that's what we're going to do tonight. So tonight I'm going to ask you, what is the worst HVAC? I think we asked this question a week or two ago, but I'm going to ask it again. Please share an HVAC horror story. Maybe a story of something that you've had, that you've dealt with your heating and air system or a heating and air company. Share us with us an HVAC horror story. And love to hear about that. Jason says the building I'm going to tomorrow is all Daikin. It has VRV, 4 RTUs, 100-ton split systems. Good luck, pal. That's some of those can be a head scratcher, but I know they also have, you guys have some software and things like that you can use to do troubleshooting. Hopefully it's just a trip breaker. Tech Junkie says, Ryan, that is a calculation you can do, but you need to know your BTU usage. It's likely about the same. And I can see the future of being expensive for anything other than electric. Arch says, Tech Junkie, if it's within our budget and reliable, I'll look into a higher SEER package unit. However, I really don't want a unit with all the bells and whistles because it will be costlier to fix. Alex says, do you recommend an AC slim style inverter for a central air system, or would you recommend going with a regular single stage square AC style? Alex, that's a loaded question. I would probably defer to your local contractors. I can tell you, if you were a customer of mine, that would be an easy answer. And I would probably tell you to take a look at the Daikin Fit, because we sell Daikin, and Daikin fits are, they're inverters, they're communicating technology, they're efficient, they're quiet, they're much more comfortable because they don't up and down constantly, and they dehumidify better. That's my quick answer. But I think ultimately, Alex, you just need to get some quotes. You need to find the best contractor in your area and then go with what they recommend. Brian says, big issue with new tight houses. They don't need to cool as much. The AC has been the only dehumidifier in a humid, cool day. Muggy occurs. Jason says it's been 109 here in Austin, Texas. Heat index of 121. Wow, that's crazy. Yeah, I was in Houston for the Daikin trip a couple weeks ago, and the heat index was almost 110. So I can't imagine what 121 feels like. You guys, man, y'all are powering through. Tech Junkie says, I was privileged to be a part of the dehumidification webinar with Brian Orr and a lady from Santa Fe Dehumidifiers. A real eye-opener how new units are actually working. Dehu is now a requirement, in my opinion. Interesting. Of course, that's what Santa Fe Dehumidifiers is going to say. Just kidding. Brian says, what about air-to-water heat pumps? I think it depends on the situation, but that's something we see a whole lot more over in Europe, although we are seeing them more and more over here. I think one of you the other night commented on one that you had installed or at least quoted. So I don't think they're as prevalent here, and I don't necessarily think that's a good thing, but I think that guys install and sell what they're used to as well. John says, Josh, is the enhanced fit going to skew their sensible to latent calling ratio to impress feds like other manufacturers, but leave consumers struggling to deal with humidity? No, I think the enhanced fit is just going to be a much more efficient, larger coil, probably, version of the fit. Tech Junkie says, Brian, stupid expensive for what little it offers. John says it's time to buy a dehumidifier. There is no way around that, a higher efficiency unit. John says, is the enhanced fit? Oh, did I go backwards? This is the same question. I must have went backwards. Tech Junkie says, besides, a dehumidifier with ventilation will offer much more than a solo AC heat pump system. Brian says, let me know when. I'll try to get a dealer to pay for it. Daikin visit. I'm going to maybe even skip over some of y'all's comments to each other. He must be talking about a train. I'm not talking about train when I'm talking about the pricing. Debbie says 407C is a better option. Better option for what? I think 407C, isn't that a... I think that's a drop-in for R22 or replacement. Yeah, it's an R22 replacement. Richard says, I have a 19-year-old airflow unit. Can I still get compressors for the unit? If so, where? I don't know, pal. Airflow. Let's see. It says that's a Linux product. I've never heard of that brand, to be completely honest with you. We don't have that brand in my area, but that doesn't mean that it's good or bad. It just means I've never heard of it. And it's also not uncommon for companies to sell, you know, the same products under rebranded names. And I'm trying to find their website. Airflow is an economical brand of HVAC units produced by Lennox. The Airflow product line includes gas furnaces, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I don't know, pal. I mean, 19 years old. I can tell you that if it was made by some brands, it probably wouldn't be available. But you can try with your local Lennox supplier, or some of their brands. So maybe it cross references with, say, a Daikin or Armstrong. And the same part will go in there. Jason says 407C with POE oil. Yes. Mineral oil. No. John says, are you a fan of preheating for humidity control rather than a supplemental dehumidifier? I mean, in our area, it's very humid. So if a home needs a dehumidifier, there are things we can do to get the heating and air system to dehumidify better. Sometimes getting that refrigerant spot on. We've had customers that their systems, whether the subcool's off or whatever reason, maybe the coils are dirty, whatever the reason is, it's not dehumidifying better. We can sometimes adjust airflow and also, clean the coils and things like that to try to get that system to dehumidify better. But in the end, in my area, if they need a dehumidifier, a lot of times they need a dehumidifier. Debbie says best brand with that refrigerant is what I'm seeking. Yeah, we don't install that R22 equipment around here, Debbie. So I'm not sure where you're located. But we install Daikin, which they're going to be doing R32. So I'm not really sure. Brian says we should do lunch. I agree, Brian. Let me know. Reach out to Griffin Air at my office, and maybe we can hook that up. Tech Junkie says, why do you want 407C? Yeah, I'm confused on that too. Jason says, knowing where to strike at 39. Jason says, next year is 25 years in the HVAC trade. Congrats, pal. Do something on your bucket list, man. Life is short. Let's see. Dehumidifiers are so energy efficient, loud, etc. I think you probably mean not energy, or right. Sorry, I read it wrong. Energy inefficient. I actually agree with you on that. At least some of them anyway. Some of them can be quite pricey at times, but sometimes folks, sometimes folks need what they need, Brian says, nice hat. Thanks, Brian. If we do lunch, I'll bring you a hat. Just remind me. Cyclone says, thank you for sharing your knowledge and experiences. I enjoy listening in and always trying to learn. Thank you for your kind words. Brian says, I don't and can't sell off government anything. Arch says, I'll talk to an HVAC contractor who said he took seminars on how to upsell his customers, but said he recommends the lowest SEER units to his residential customers because of the lower price. Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. So you guys are bringing back up the pricing and the selling and all of that. I think it's okay to say to a consumer, hey, I'm going to recommend a higher end product or a higher price as long as you have a good reason for it, but simply recommending that they replace parts on their system that are not broken to make more money, I just think is a little dirty, or if you're trying to sell them a heating and air system when they don't necessarily need a heating and air system yet, that's just a little dirty. I don't know. I unfortunately, a lot of those guys are the reason our industry sometimes gets a bad name. And a lot of you guys know that because you tell me. Emery says, how does a dual fuel system work? Um, so that's a loaded question. I can tell you in general, there's exceptions to every rule, but basically a dual fuel system is typically a heat pump system outside and then some sort of fossil fuel backup. So whether that could be gas, it could be oil, it could be some sort of hydronics, things like that. But usually, I would say in our area, usually it's going to be some sort of gas furnace backup. And so what it'll do is it'll run off that heat pump and then it'll have a lockout temperature. So if it gets below a certain temperature, a balance point temperature, we even did a video talking about figuring out what that balance point temperature is. And so let's just say it's 30 degrees. So if it gets below 30 degrees, it's going to run gas. If it gets above 30 degrees and you have it in heating mode, it's going to run off of heat pump. So that's in a snapshot how a dual fuel system works. Jason says, my coworker stepped on a fire sprinkler line, flooded the whole house, $275,000 in damage. That's pretty crazy. That must be a nice house for them to have sprinklers in the house and it being almost $300,000 in damage. Brian says, what is your service area? So we live in Middlesex and in Virginia, and we service everywhere within an hour for the most part. And so we have some customers in King William, even though that's a little far for us. And we do have some customers down in the West Point, New Kent areas. So we don't come to quite to Richmond or Mechanicsville. So, Tech Junkie says 5 tons for a home is outrageous. And if it needs one, then it likely can be done with 2 smaller and more efficient, quiet units. Some 5-ton units don't even put out 5 tons. Yeah, I don't know, pal. I mean, we see 5-ton systems from time to time in our area, but I agree. I mean, especially if it's a house with an upstairs and downstairs, I'm going to do 2, like a 3 and a 2 or a 2.5 or whatever the house calls for. But, sometimes the system was installed that way and, maybe it's a 5-ton system with zoning. Maybe it's no zoning. Maybe it's just a big home with high ceilings, it just depends. Brian says reheat is cheap dehumidifier. I installed the air to water heat pump. John says, can anyone identify an excellent consultant to do a manual JD? Most contractors in my area either refuse to do so, disparage, or fake them. John, I've got a guy. If you reach out to our office, I've got a guy that I will tell you, we get a lot of YouTube calls, and my office will sometimes ignore them because we get so many. People just call and they're like, I need to talk to Josh and I've got questions. And so she'll usually send them to our website, newhvacguide.com. But, I just don't have time to run a company and answer every time somebody calls. But John, if you call and tell her, that I said for you to call and that you're just looking for the guy that does manual J calculations, we can hook you up with somebody. Bird Dog says, I'm looking for a variable speed 4-ton without all the bells and whistles in Houston. What brand is more bare bones without all of the extras? I mean, there's several brands. It's not even a brand thing. So even the higher end brands are going to have, systems that are less bells and whistles. So I would focus more on finding a good contractor and going with just tell them I want a simple system. I don't want bells and whistles. I don't want, give me the thermostat with the bulb on it. Arch says, I don't have any personal HVAC horror stories to comment on, but a local HVAC salesman told me one of the big heavyset technicians' foot went through a customer's flat roof. Oh my gosh, man. I'm sure the customer probably expected the technician to pay for that, but is that technician really responsible if the roof is so weak? I don't know. Maybe you guys might disagree. Carl says water source heat pumps are a big thing in Southern California. Bird Dog says I have 2 units, a 3-ton and the other is a 4-ton. Ed says the geothermal unit I had put in from a HVAC company, they didn't braze the line very well and had a very slow leak, and they couldn't find the leak. Paid to have it topped off a couple of times. Tell them to add some dye in there. They'll find that leak. Airflow is a Linux builder model. Ed says they finally figured it out, but at one point said if I got maintenance, it would be easier to find the leak. Let's see. I'm just going to skip through some of y'all's comments and see if there's a question in here. Brian, welcome to the show, says, poor in Michigan. What is the cost to replace a carrier evaporator panel? It just depends. Every market's different. See if you can get a couple quotes, without having them come to your house. Maybe you can even give them the model number and tell them what's wrong. And maybe they can at least give you a ballpark figure of what that part's going to cost and overall. Blazer says, how do you tell which way the blower in a air handler furnace is supposed to spin? Sometimes they spin backwards. Some motors are reversible. So that has happened before. Or if a motor actually starts to fail, it will sometimes spin backwards. I've seen capacitor replacements fix that, but a lot of times, the motor is starting to fail. If the original OEM motor is not reversible and it's running backwards, a lot of times that's a sign that it's either failing or about to completely fail. American Patriot says, well, because of you, I saved over $3,000 and I appreciate it, sir. Nice. $3,000. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. Seeing if I see any more questions in your comments. Bear with me. I'm going through a lot of your comments. I got a little behind tonight and I don't have a person. Some of these folks that do these shows, they have a moderator and I just don't have one, unfortunately. This comment says, do you work for J&B? And I'm not familiar, unless you're talking about JB Associates, J&B. J&B. I don't know. I just searched that, seeing if it's something I don't know. J&B, let's see. Yeah, I'm not seeing, I don't know what that is, pal. Can you give me a little more context? Oh, Jason, you weren't even talking to me. Jeez, I'm a dummy. Brian says, send me the map. It's on our website. Lenny has a company that borders you. Bucky says, thank you for the insight. I've been following a while, trying to get informed before my Goodman system installed in 2002 dies. Nice, man. You got 21 years on that system. You got your money's worth. Emery says, how come when a system oversized, it satisfies the thermostat setting fast and fails to remove humidity? It just simply boils down to it's not running long enough to get that humidity out of the house, so it's not actually a dehumidifier. It's not meant to, I think just by default, because of how they work, they dehumidify from the house. But if that system is oversized and it dehumidifies too fast, you have short cycling and you also have humidity problems. Ryan says, what forces the air to flow through the vents harder? What forces the air to the fan speed only, or a combination of blower fan speed settings and a tonnage of the unit? Yeah, I mean, the obviously the fan speeds and the fan itself plays a big role in that, but there is other things such as velocity and duct sizing that can play a role. I actually saw a tip from a guy this past week, and I swore I wouldn't talk about this, but I saw a guy on a heating and air on a website for heating and air techs, and he said that ducts can never be oversized. And I didn't say any. I mean, I obviously didn't comment on it. I don't feel like fighting, but I actually disagree with that to a point, and the commercial guys would definitely disagree with that. Now, I think to a point when it comes to the return, that is actually true, that, you can oversize the return. It's no problem. But if you oversize some of your supply ducts, that's when you start having issues where the ducts or the vents that are further from the unit aren't getting enough air, So imagine if you're going to blow through a straw, right? And then all of a sudden you cut a gigantic hole in the side of that straw, you're going to have less air coming out the end of that straw because some of it is now escaping. And the bigger you cut that hole, the more air vents that are closer to that unit, and it's lessening the velocity or the amount of air that's being pushed to those ducts that are further away from the unit. So I'm not sure where he was going with that. Maybe some of you guys saw that if you follow some of the heating and air stuff. I don't know. Maybe some of you heating and air guys might even disagree with me, but I just thought that was an odd thing for him to say. And he was actually representing ACA, which is, supposed to be the setting the standard for a lot of guys. Ryan says, horror story. A contractor sent me this picture as proof of their work to install a mini split. I ran away. We all have. We've done that before, right? Emery says, can outdoor fans spin backwards? Yes, especially if they're reversible. A couple of you guys are chatting at each other. Okay. I think we're pretty caught up here. If you do have any questions, any more heating and air questions, feel free to drop those in the chat. We're going to be wrapping up here shortly, but we wrap up every show the same way. And so if you've never joined us before, or if you're one of our regulars, feel free to join in as well. And so every week we shout out those good companies across the United States and Canada that are doing things right. So if you have a good heating and air company in your area that does things good, does things right, feel free to give them a shout out. Give them a shout out on our show. You have my permission to shout out a good heating and air company, and also shout out where they are located in the country. So that way you can, give them some love. Maybe somebody in your area might come across your comment shouting out this good company. And, you might even send them a little business. So anyway, I'm trying to read your comments and talk. My dad used to always make fun of me and say I couldn't walk and chew bubblegum at the same time. And multitasking is not my thing. So Bird Dog says Hvac of conventional AC. I think he's saying, or a conventional AC unit. That's a tough question. I think that I would go with the better contractor. I definitely would not go with the Hvac if I was going to be that company's one of their first customers installing that unit. I wouldn't want to be anybody's guinea pig. Whereas, conventional systems, single stage systems, you might be able to get it straight or whatever. So the Hvac, I think inverter systems across the board are better in general than a single stage system. But again, I wouldn't want to be anybody's guinea pig. And the other thing I would just throw out there is I don't think any of these non-communicating inverter systems are as good as a communicating inverter system. So there are guys out there trying to pretend like they are, but they're just not. John says makeup air codes are arguably appropriately obsessed with makeup air for a kitchen cooktop vent, but why is there no concern of dryer vents? They exhaust about 100 CFM and it runs for 1 or 2 hours. It's a good point. Definitely a good point, especially when you're talking about commercial stuff. Bob says, if I survive the heat, I'll see you next week. Happy selling. Thanks, Bob. Emery says, meant to ask you, but the Seating, I think you're saying ceiling is leaking and stained. Could that be due to a faulty HVAC drain pan? Yes, it could be. Usually you should have some sort of secondary drain pan underneath that system to catch that water. And if you've got water coming through your ceiling, I would definitely call a pro and get that straight before you have a bigger problem on your hands. Brian says, I sent an image of the mini split install to your email. Let me know what you think of that installation. I ignored the quote after that. I will definitely show that on a future show, Ryan. If it's good. And it sounds like it is. Ed says, Mr. Cool, just kidding. I live 8 miles from Ingram's and work in the same industrial park. No comment on them. Yeah. So again, if you know of any good heating and air companies out there, contractors, Ed, not these brands that are posers. I shouldn't have said that. I think that I will say that I think it's great when there are companies out there trying to come up with better solutions or more solutions for homeowners, but I just don't think that is a good company to be doing it, in my opinion. And I'm just not going to say why, but they're just I think they're doing a lot of things that to a lot of people. Let's put it that way. I've got customers of mine that called us and spent a lot of money, and have been, in my opinion, taken advantage of. We'll say that. Emery says, "What do I do if someone does unlicensed HVAC work?" You mean on your home? If they did something wrong, you can, if they've done something illegal, you can sue them, or whatever. But if you're just saying, of someone out there doing unlicensed HVAC work, it depends on what state you're in. Some states are stricter than others, and some of them will even put people in jail if they're doing things they're not supposed to. So, if you're asking who should you call if you want to tattle on them, it depends on where you're at and all of that. But I don't know. I know of companies running around here that are not licensed and they're doing stuff they shouldn't, but I don't know. I don't tattle, but I do think that it's unfortunate because homeowners are a lot of times the ones that pay for it, but anyway, it's kind of a weird, do they pretend to be licensed? Brian says, yeah, some of them will even put licensed and insured on their on their business cards, and they're not. I know of a company around here that does that, and they're not a heating and air company. They do other stuff, but they are not licensed and insured. It's not a good thing. So anyway, yeah. And that's why it's okay if you're a homeowner to ask, hey, can I see your license and insurance? And if you don't want to have that weird, awkward, if you're the homeowner and you're like, well, I don't want to really start off on the wrong foot and piss off my potential heating and air guy that I could have do business with for years and years to come. Then just tell them your cousin who lives in another state that does heating and air told you to ask them for it. Most companies, legit companies with multiple employees, that's not usually who's doing that stuff. It's the guys that are, moonlighting or, mom and pop shops. Just make even if they're a gigantic company, they should not have a problem with you asking. I wouldn't have a problem with it if somebody said, hey, I need to see a COI, a certificate of insurance, and I need to see a proof of your license. In my state, you can look anybody up right now. You can look me up right now on their website. And so I wish every state was like that. And you could find out immediately if a company actually is licensed. Carl says, is plumbing a part of HVAC work there? Plumbing is its own other license. So we have plumbers, heating and air, electrical, and gas fitting. And now they've actually, they used to be just those four. And now they've added a whole bunch more here in Virginia, like septic services, where they have to have their own license to do that. So anyway, this has by far been our biggest show. More people have been on this live show than any other live show we've done. And so that must mean I'm saying something right. Probably not. You know, it definitely ain't because of these looks. But I do want to say thank you to you guys. If you are tuning in and you are not a subscriber, please subscribe. We're going to be doing some really cool things coming up, and you don't want to miss that. Things that nobody else is doing, things in the heating and air industry. We did the Daikin trip, showed you guys behind the scenes in their factory, and we're also going to be doing some other things. Boom, I'm hitting you guys with a little bit of little teaser. I've got another thing that we're going to be doing soon, that showing homeowners a part of our industry that you don't normally get to see either. So stay tuned on that, and so on. So Brian, I don't know what that means. Anyway, so nobody shouted out any good companies tonight, so I'm going to shout out one. If you live in Virginia and you are within an hour of Middlesex County, so if you're in Williamsburg, Middle Peninsula, Northern Neck, call Griffin Air. That's us. So I'll shout us out. But anyway, all right, guys. Well, we're going to end with that. Thank you for tuning in. Hit that subscribe button. We'll be back next week, 8:30 Eastern. Find out what that is in your time zone, and we will be live again, answering heating and air questions and also having some fun. So thanks for watching. Make it a great week. We'll see you then.